Good day, everybody. It is another exciting day in the desert here. It almost wanted to rain where I was. Almost. It teased a little bit and then it went away. Such as it is out here in the deserts of Arizona. So, welcome, everybody. We are going to be doing our second live stream today on the Cosmic Doctrine by Dion Fortune. So, there's actually two books that we go off of, and we'll see if my filter lets me actually show these. The first one is Dion Fortune's book itself, The Cosmic Doctrine. The second one is a commentary by a brother named John Michael Greer. David's filter doesn't filter his out because he doesn't have one. So that's the book. We will be going over chapter 6 today. Now, if you don't know what the Cosmic Doctrine is, the Cosmic Doctrine was written by an early to mid 20th century Christian mystic named Dion Fortune, who is very prolific. I messed that word up. Prolific. There's the word. In the esoteric circles. And this book is considered by many to be a cornerstone piece of any esoteric literature or any esoteric knowledge. So it's one of those they advise you should go through it at least one time. And so that's kind of what the Cosmic Doctrine is. In chapter 6, we are going to be moving into a new part, if you're following along, and this is going to be the evolution of what she calls a solar system. And the thing that you have to remember is that this book should not be taken literally. This is, like most esoteric writings, something for you to think about and to kind of wrap your brain around. And the whole purpose of this book is to teach you to think in a different way, and you'll start to see it'll start to speed up as we move through into the later chapters. But anyhow, I am now going to turn the stage over to Brother David Morgan, who is going to be leading us through chapter 6. If anyone has any questions, please ask in either the chat in Discord, or you are free to drop a chat in the live stream, and I will relay that over to him. So with that being said, Brother David, take it away.
All right. Well, this one probably won't be as long since we're only going through a single chapter tonight. And as Brother Chris said, probably the most important thing to remember here, and this starts to get a little tricky, especially from the last chapter and the next few chapters, is that right? We said it's a philosophical work, so it's designed to train your mind, not inform it. And when we start talking about many of the things in here, they're meant to be taken as metaphor. However, what Dion Fortune started to talk about last time, and what we'll continue talking about this time, is actually our own solar system, our own ring cosmos, ring chaos that affects us by our great entity, which was talked about last time, and which Dion Fortune calls the solar logos, and views it as existing within the sun, as the sun is the great light bringer and life giver of our solar system and our planet. So again, just keep that in mind as we go through. There's definitely a metaphor side, but we're also starting to get not a little more literal, but a little more close to home, I guess is maybe the way to put it as far as the metaphors go. We're stopping looking at the big scheme of things, and we're starting to focus more in on our own experiences and our own understanding of the world. So there's a couple of things that are important here, and that's that when we start talking about our solar system, right, we're mostly talking, most of the interaction of that solar system comes from within. It's within our own ring cosmos, ring chaos, that a lot of complexity is happening, where all these atoms are colliding, and as I said, complexity is being born as greater atoms are created. But another important thing to note there is that there is also, we don't exist in a vacuum, that we are just one great entity, and there are innumerable great entities out there, and that when she starts talking about them as far as the star logoi, and we'll get into that a lot further on. But the important thing to note in this particular instance is just that there is subtle influences from outside our solar system that do impact us, and you can kind of see that in when we start talking about things. If you've ever looked into astrology at all, right? They say the stars, right? The position of the stars influence events and things that happen in your life, and that's a little bit of kind of what she's hinting at here in this chapter. Is that it's not just the influences inside; there are influences outside. Because when we talked about the ring cosmos, the ring chaos in the first part, we're talking about everything as a whole, right? There's the manifest and the unmanifest. Well, outside of our solar system, there's still manifest. It's just not our manifest that affects us, right? And so again, just something to keep in mind there, that there is subtle influences outside of our area of control. And then she really starts getting into a lot of kind of numbers and numerology in this chapter. And we've already touched a little bit on that, where you have the 3 rings, the 12 rays, the 7 planes, and we talked a little about that last time, Chris, when we mentioned that you add all those up together and you get 22, which is the number of paths of the tree of life. And the great entities are atoms that have that are a tertiary. They have a 10. 10 is their powerful number, which obviously is the number of spheres in the tree of life. But Dion Fortune makes a very specific, very interesting view of it here. Usually, when you're looking at the tree of life, you're looking at the spheres, and Dion Fortune, as we talked about before, movement is important, and so she says actually it's the paths that connect the spheres that are more important than the spheres themselves. The spheres are the destination. The path is actually what we have to go through in order to evolve to interact with that sphere. So from her cosmos here, it's actually the movement that is more important than the destination and what happens in those spheres.
Which is interesting from a Kabbalistic standpoint, because so 22 is also the 22 letters of the biblical Hebrew alphabet, which is what makes up, all of the tarot, the major arcana, and the tree of life. And a lot of people ignore those paths. They ignore from the different spheros connecting them. If you look at the tree of life, and if you study it at all, then each path does have a letter keyed to it, and also a tarot. If you get into some of the other orders, there's a tarot card associated with it. So that there is a very heavy emphasis on the paths themselves, because you're right, they join those 2 spheres together, which means they take on the properties of both of those spheres as you're transversing from one to the other. And that journey is as important as the destination itself.
Yep. And then she also mentions here that when we're talking about the concentric rings, the planes, that the atoms on those planes have a certain makeup. So the first ring, I think, is 3, and then all the way out to 9 on the 7th. And then you have in the very center of it, you have the central, what she calls the central stillness, which is where the solar logoi or solar logos resides. And so you've got most of the numbers from 1 to 12 there, but there's 2 numbers that don't show up, and these are also important numbers, because the numbers 2 and 11 don't show up in that mix at all. And in Dion Fortune's cosmos, the number 2 is associated to that negative evil that we talked about last time, which is the thrust block that you need in order to learn. And then 11 is the positive evil, the evil of conscious beings exercising their free will in making poor choices. And one thing that she notes here that's somewhat important is that positive evil, what we tend to think of as evil, isn't necessary for cosmic evolution, right? There may be cosmos out there that the individual beings in it did not make the mistakes that we as humans have made, and there may not be positive evil in some of those places. But as we said earlier in last week, is that the negative evil is necessary. It has to be there. It's the I always kind of think of it as it's the if you want to think about it from a scientific metaphor, it's the friction that causes the chemical reaction, right? In order for something to happen, you need that thrust block, that friction, in order to act against it. Whereas the positive evil is not necessary. And Greer has a very interesting, we mentioned it last time, that negative evil is the resistance to evolution, whereas positive evil is the refusal of evolution. It's a conscious choice to not try to evolve. So let's see here. So then we get into we've already sort of mentioned the zodiac connection there. Another very interesting point that she makes in this, and that Greer talks about quite a bit when looking at things historically, is, and the example he gives is the planet Venus, that back in I think it was Mesopotamian times, and Mayan times, texts that have been deciphered is that Venus was the planet of war and of love. And nowadays, we don't tend to think of Venus as the planet of war. That's Mars, right? And so his sort of supposition there is that, over time, the influences of Venus, the positive influences, have grown, and those more warlike influences have dropped off. And this is important because this sort of mentions that the evolution of the cosmos is cumulative, right? What happened before, when it starts to settle into that stability, becomes the foundation for the next step of evolution. And this is a very simple and easy thing to think about in our own lives, right? The choices that we make, the foundations that we set for ourselves in our actions, in our finances, in our relationships, become the stepping stone to the next step of that. And Dion Fortune has a really kind of beautiful phrase where she says, "You start where God leaves off." That even God is evolving, and we are, the choices that we make are a part of that. Let's see here. What do you got, Bill?
We have a couple questions, actually. We have Bill.
Yep.
Can positive evil ascend up the path as well or only negative evil? And then I have another one on the live stream I'll ask.
Okay. I'm not entirely sure what you mean by up the path. If you're talking about evolution, the goal of evolution, right, is to continue to grow, to get closer back to what the divine is. So the thing to think about there, right, is that when we start talking about our solar system, right, it has all the influences of the first metaphor that we talked about, as far as the 3 rings, the 12 rays, the 7 planes, and when the solar logos attempts to do this, it doesn't make that; those already exist, right? It creates sort of a facsimile of it. It's trying to learn more about itself by imitating what's higher up in the divine. And so, as far as evolution goes, ideally, the positive evil will be weeded out, right? We already just mentioned that positive evil is not necessary for evolution. And so ultimately, what is hoped, and we'll get into this quite a bit more later on in the book when we start talking about more specifically the evolution of the soul. I'm skipping ahead just a little bit here, but the idea is that you will weed out the positive evil. If you become an individual that is only linked to positive evil, you're going to be shot out of the ring cosmos out to the ring past not, and who knows what happens to you out there. You're not going to be a part of the evolution of this solar system anymore.
Right. So choose wisely.
Yes.
Choose your path wisely. So, positive evil, again, that just for those who may not know, are asking the difference between positive and negative evil. Positive evil are choices you make. Those are the naughty things, basically, that you choose to chase after or just fill your life with. Negative evil are like challenges. Those are the things like, why do the bad things happen to me? Well, they happen to you to give you an opportunity to grow, which is what, for the people on my channel have watched that for the whole last year and a half. So that's always an important distinguish. And one other thing we have a question on the live stream. This one is off topic a little bit, so it can be a very brief answer, but Cherub wants to know, where did numerology originate from? Just a basic question. I think it was Pythagoras. I think it was Pythagoras back in the Greek times. Phil may know more about that because he's a big Pythagoras guy. Maybe someone in our chat might know.
Well, I want to say it may even go back further than that.
It may.
That it may be Egyptian or even Mesopotamian. Because numbers have been important for a very long time, right? We talk about the 3, the 7, the 12,
22, the 32, and the 33,
and 42, the meaning of life, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But Dion Fortune didn't just like pull these numbers out of her ass, right? These are numbers that pop up time and time and time again, going way back into antiquity. And so where it originated from, I don't know that even historians that understand it are going to necessarily know that answer. But it goes way back.
Fair enough. Thank you for asking the question as well.
Yeah. And then the next thing that she sort of starts talking about here is that when we're thinking about our solar system, it exists on the 7th plane, the furthest from the central stillness. And as we just mentioned, we're not the only great entity, right? There were other entities, if you remember the metaphors that we talked about last week, that there were sort of static atoms that settled out into those rings and then never returned to the central stillness. And then there were the traveling atoms who went all the way out to the end and came back and did their various loops through all the different rays, all the different planes. But even in our solar system, and again, if you want to think about it from a physical standpoint, right, that our solar system itself, there are other entities there on the inner planes, on the planes that we can't physically see and touch and taste and feel, right? And they're also rotating around the central stillness. And so if you want to think about it sort of in terms of gravity, because in our solar system, it's not just atoms of that are 10-sided or however you want to think about it. They're atoms of all different shapes and sizes, because as that great entity was moving through the planes, it was gravitationally sucking in things from all the other planes. And so as these other great entities rotate around the central stillness, you can think of it similar to like an eclipse, right? As the moon moves in front of the sun, right? There's a change, and so that's one of the things that Dion Fortune mentions here, is that as these other entities are moving on the various different planes, they can affect things in our solar system. And so when we start talking about crazy things that sort of the like a collective madness or a change in we could think about it even from like a cultural perspective, as far as like the Renaissance and how the thinking of the Middle Ages changed into the Renaissance. That very well could have been one of these other entities affecting all of the things on our plane and affecting that change. So again, kind of going back to one of the things we mentioned before, right? That it's not just the physical things that we can see that are affecting us. There's all kinds of things out there that have subtle pulls upon us and the things around us. We've got a few more questions here or comments.
Yeah, a few more comments if you want to go through those. Dark matter, dark energy. Ethan, seeing how numbers and patterns repeat to create symbolism is interesting. I can see why that question was asked. Very good, yes.
So one of the, I want to touch on the dark matter and dark energy comment there for a moment, because one of the biggest things with science right now, right, is that if you can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't test it,
right,
it doesn't exist.
It's not real.
It's not real. And yet, dark matter and dark energy are theoretical right now. There's no way to test it. And so I have seen some, and I want to say that they say like, what is it, like 98% of the universe or something they think is dark matter. It's a very big number.
It's a very big number. It's like a tiny percentage is actually matter that we can actually see and interact with.
Right, and so I've seen some comments to that effect of that. Well, maybe all of these things on the other planes that we talk about, the life energy and the emotions and the mental understanding and the gods and the angels, like, they may be made, like, this dark matter may be what they are. It's not something that science can test or prove or anything like that, but it's a vast amount of our universe that we just don't have any understanding of. And as we sort of talked about in the last time, right, we as humans didn't evolve to understand the greater mysteries of the universe. We evolved to find food and mates and shelter. And so that our senses are designed to do those things. Luckily, we have pretty advanced brains for our planet, and we can theorize some of this stuff. But that was one of the things that I had read that I thought was, that's kind of interesting, that dark matter and dark energy may actually be the true stuff of the cosmos. All these things that Dion Fortune talks about that we just can't see and interact and feel and touch and test.
We have a question from the live stream. Can we get an explanation what dark matter and dark energy is?
I'd have to leave that to an astrophysicist.
That's a physics. Yeah, exactly. That's a physics question.
Yeah, because I mean, my layman's understanding is that is that astrophysicists can see that there's something there in the universe, but they can't, I shouldn't even say see. They can theorize that there's something there, but they can't see it. They can't test it. None of our telescopes pick it up, and so they say, oh well, space is is filled with a whole bunch of nothing, and it's like, well, it actually may be filled with a whole bunch of stuff. We just can't test it or see it or interact with it physically.
And even with things we can, though, let's also, I like to use this analogy a lot. There are things that are like X-rays and different waves of light that the chemicals or the compounds in our eyes don't register, but that doesn't mean they're not there. We don't see those things right here. We don't hear certain frequencies, but that doesn't mean they're not there. We know there are things we cannot see. We know there are things we cannot hear as from our flawed senses. So that's the thing. Everything we're taking in, this is the flaw of science. Now, I love science. I'm an engineer. But the flaw of science is that we're using 5 very flawed senses as our input structures to try to understand the things around us. So we have to bear an open mind. There's things we don't understand. And string theory itself is even starting to move into that. There's other dimensions around us that they were able to start to prove that are sitting on top of us, which is where all, that's where the woo-woo and the science start to come together a little bit. We have a lot of other comments going on.
Well, and one of the funny things that I always think about just when it comes to stuff like that with science is that a lot of that's based on belief as well. Because have you ever seen an X-ray?
Nope.
I hear that there are machines that can show you these things, but I've never actually seen one. I'm taking it all on faith that these scientists know what the hell they're talking about.
Right.
But do they really? That's,
Yep. So we have a couple other comments. Well, we have a little conversation spewing here. Let's see. Phil, I recommend looking for more practical version of negative, positive, evil. Look into positive and negative liberty, a concept that was big in that era as well. Do you have any info on that?
I am not familiar with that concept.
Phil, you've broken our brains. I have also not heard that before, so I look forward to that conversation, learning something new every day. And Phil's good at that. He's good at teaching us new things we've never heard of before, so I appreciate you for that. Let's see, Ethan, there's neutronian waves, which we can use to measure those, but I do like the comparison. And then Alarka, yeah, TLDR, dark matter energy. Current cosmological models cannot explain a lot of aspects of what we're seeing out there. And dark matter energy is the current leading theory to try to explain that. So that's a little bit of another perspective on what dark energy and matter might be. And then Bill Protagoras called it the ether.
All right. So probably one of the I would say the bigger concepts that are sort of trying to be imprinted on in this particular chapter is actually one that I see on Chris's tag for his Discord name, which is "As Above, So Below." Right? We were talking about the big concepts of the rings and the rays, and that now we're starting to narrow things down to talk about our specific situation in the solar system that we inhabit. But you can break it down even further, right? And we talked about some of those examples, specific examples last week when we were mentioning, negative evil is that friction, right? And we had the example of rain, that if I want to go play outside and I don't like the rain, then the rain may be an evil to me. But to the gardener who wants it to rain, the rain is not a negative evil, right? It's a positive step in evolution. And again, just talking about our own situations, right? Again, all the concepts that are being talked about here applicable to our own lives. I mentioned earlier, sort of the building of a foundation, right? Is probably I think one of the biggest points of this particular chapter is that evolution is cumulative. Our lives are cumulative. I think everybody gets into this habit sometimes of looking back and saying, well, man, if I had only not made that mistake, like I'd be so much better off, right? And it's actually one of the things that I've mentioned before in my journey in Freemasonry is that, oh man, where was Freemasonry like 20 years ago? Why didn't I find out about this 20 years ago? But then I look at who I was 20 years ago, and I say, I wouldn't have gotten anything out of it. Like, I wasn't ready at that time. It was the cumulative experiences of my life that led me to where I am now, and I found it when I was ready to find it.
That's I had, and I have the same. I said I was 25 years too late. Like, I got initiated into Freemasonry. I'm almost 50, so, and I've known about it since I was early 20s, and I've just wasn't the right time in the cosmos for me until later on in my life. Yep.
But that's kind of this chapter here. If there's any specific questions or any questions you want to bring up from that you didn't get to bring up from the last time as well, now would be a perfect time to do so.
We have a little explanation on negative liberty and positive liberty. Negative liberty is the idea that people should be free from external constraints and interference by others. Positive liberty is the ability to act in accordance with one's will while taking into account the structural limitations of society that may affect that ability. And then Ethan follows up with neutral liberties, working with the gray area between the two. I'm always a fan of the neutral path, the gray path. That's kind of where I try to balance myself in between, but that's an interesting approach, negative and positive liberty. Any comments on that?
Well, I'm still wrapping my head around it here because so negative liberty is the idea that people should be free from external constraints and interference by others.
That's more the I will do whatever I want to do. Do as thou will is the law, right? Is that where that comes from? That sounds like an Aleister Crowley thing.
It does. And then positive liberty is the ability to act in accordance with one's will while taking into account the structural limitations of society that may affect that ability. Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it there. The negative liberty is do as thou will, and positive liberty is trying to is enacting your will, but trying to maintain the structure of society while doing so.
Being cognizant that if you just run amok, that you're destroying things around you, and you may end up on the one-way ticket on the comet outside, taking you out.
Right, and again, that's again one way to think about the positive and the negative evil is that we talked about that the positive evil is aligning yourself with the ring chaos as it's moving to try and dissolve things. And if you think about it, the things that are considered positive evil, right, are things like it, and obviously it's different in different cultures, but for the most part, I think most of us can agree that murder and rape and stealing and robbery and those things are bad. You shouldn't do them if you want to be a good person, right? And if you look at those things, they're taking away from somebody else. They're taking something that's not yours, and you're depriving somebody of something, whether it's free will, whether it's their life or their money. That's what it means to be synced up with the ring chaos, whereas the ring cosmos wants to build. If you're focusing on building your life, building your finances, building your relationships and your money and your friendships and things like this, where you're working on building your understanding, you're aligning with the ring cosmos.
We do have a question from the live stream. Can we explain what the 7 planes represent? So this is kind of going to go back into more of the beginning chapters that we talked about last week, but what's a summary of the 7 planes?
Well, so the 7 planes, as far as we've talked about, so we're going to get into the 7 planes a whole lot more later on. But the 7 planes, as Dion Fortune has sort of laid them out right now, again, this is how to train your mind, how to think about this stuff. Is right now it's just the movements in space, these 7 concentric rings that have sort of settled around this central stillness. They're all rotating, and again, I always, whenever I think about this, I always think about our own solar system, like the planets moving around the sun. Like that's sort of the image that I have of these great entities circling around the central stillness, or the solar logos. But obviously, the planets are not the same as the great entities. So that's where, again, it's designed to train your mind how to think about things, but it's not saying that, oh, well, the planets must be directly related to. No, that's not right.
It's a metaphor. That's the thing we have to keep remembering. It's all a metaphor.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, it gets a little difficult sometimes because now we're starting to talk about an actual solar system, and so you have to separate the, okay, we're talking about the solar system, but we can't. But these are still metaphors, right? And so from last week, as we talked about the atoms, right? That out of the central stillness, creation happens, and it sort of just spreads out. And as it gets towards the edge, it bounces back in, and all these atoms start colliding with each other and creating complexity. And eventually, that complexity will settle into a stable orbit. And within these, as Dion Fortune is sort of having us think about it right now, is that the more complex atoms settle further out on the rings, and the least complex atoms settle further in. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that more complex is better, because if you want to think about it, the one in the very center is the divine. So actually, the least complex the atoms are, the closer they are to the divine. And so actually being way out where we are on the 7th plane, we're actually we're the most complex, and yet also the furthest from the divine. And that's why. Go ahead.
It also means that we have the farthest to travel, both outward and inward, which means we can collect the most experiences to return back.
Absolutely. Yes. So there is a benefit to that complexity, but it also means that our path is going to be a lot longer and a lot more. We're going to encounter a lot more of that negative evil along the way.
Yep. But in the end, it's like it's forging the sword, right? You have to. Swords are not forged in comfort; they're forged in a fire, and having the hell beat out of them with a hammer. So. Yep. But in the end, it's a sharp instrument, and that's what we want for ourselves. We have anything else out in the comment section? I see Ethan's typing something.
Type faster, Ethan.
All right. So while Ethan's typing, as we're coming to the conclusion of today. So again, if you want to follow along, we're going to be doing this regularly as we go through this book. This is called The Cosmic Doctrine. Dave, can you show up the books? Because my filter's bad. Dion Fortune's The Cosmic Doctrine, and then John Michael Greer's Companion, which kind of makes it a little bit more in English. We just did chapter 6 tonight. So we will not be reconvening this live stream for another couple weeks. Our research group, meets in a couple weeks, and next week I am unavailable. So you have some time to catch up, to read chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and maybe come up with some more understanding. This is not a book that you read for leisure. This is not a book that you read like a fiction book. You're actually supposed to read a chapter and meditate on it for a month and then move on to the next chapter. But we will be talking about chapter 7 in 3 weeks, I guess, because we're going to be off for 2 weeks. So you have about 3 weeks to kind of go through it and think about it. And if you have any questions, of course, post them in the Discord, and we're glad to kind of talk about those. So Ethan says, this line of thinking seems to really follow the ideals of the natural way. Thank you so much. As always, brothers, I appreciate you so much, and we appreciate you as well, Ethan. We appreciate you as well. Phil, we have a bookshelf to assemble at the next meeting, and we're pulling out the ancient text from the basement. Oh, yes, we do. Yeah. That's lodge stuff.
Okay.
We have a lot. There's a lot of stuff down there that goes back to before Arizona was even a state. So it's pretty amazing. That's exciting. Cool. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this live stream. For paying attention, thank you very much. For those who want to stick around. We'll bring you up and we'll have a conversation afterwards. But until then, everybody, stay safe, stay healthy, read some cosmic doctrine, and we'll see you next time.